Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and I've got my camera set to wide angle so I can show you everything all the way from the very far left where the oldest of my systems are all the way over to this side where even the not even yet populated newest of my systems is awaiting now for a couple weeks, since it's been sitting here sort of priming and becoming a nice comfortable environment for worms to be moved into. This is the target, I suppose, of what we're going to try to get done today, which is the haul out of some worms that have been in their present environment for the past 21 days. They sort of look alike because neither of them has a label. The reason this doesn't have a label is because they've only been in here for 3 weeks. They originally lived in the outdoor worm bag, a fabric pot, basically. And we decided it was going to just be easier to try to migrate the worms out of their finished castings by moving them into a tub versus having them in the bag. So this edge of the bin here, pretty thoroughly covered, is the side that we've been applying feedings to and allowing to remain somewhat moist, while on the opposite edge we've been covering not so thoroughly to allow for just drying of the material naturally to evaporation. So even though we came in here 11 days ago, so the system went 10 days and then now it's gone 11 days, 21 days, 3 weeks. After the first 10 days, we just went ahead and we beefed up this feeding area, added a bunch of bedding, a bunch of food. So I can only imagine now, 11 days later, this edge of the bin's got to be pretty much loaded with 99% of the worms that lived in this system originally. Even last time we checked in, when we beefed up the feeding over here, the finished casting side seemed like it was pretty much depopulated already for the most part. So let's get this thing up on the bench, get the haul out completed, figure out what the rest of the material, the finished castings, look like or what they need going forward. Who knows, maybe at this point they can go straight in the garden. So I'm going to get a glove on, we're going to get to work. Haul outs are always fun. I've got this plastic container here, hopefully large enough to hold all the stuff that we're going to be hauling out. Before I put my glove on and get my hands soiled, really quick, just a recap of what we're dealing with here, because this, I guess, could very well be the end of this system now. After 376 days. Can you believe it? So, like I mentioned earlier, they've been in this tub now for only 21 days. And the original 355 days that they spent in the worm bag originally began outside. So almost 250 days the bag rested outside and it got really chilly. And then over the last 108 days of it being in the bag, it was actually indoors. So it sort of lost that whole concept of being an overwinter outdoor bag anymore. And then, yeah, 3 weeks ago it lost the whole identity of even being in a bag. So gradually we've almost stripped all of the meaning out of this system in terms of where it came from or what it was. And at this point, I guess, as it exits this existence and the worms just go into a brand new, fresh environment, the whole concept of the version 4 comes to an end too. And then the main beneficiaries are the plants in my garden, getting all the lovely castings. So let me get this glove on and let's get to work. These haul outs are fun. Maybe while I'm putting my glove on, I can show a short clip. Last week we even hinted at the possibility of maybe wanting to start drawing some estimates off of how many worms live in this thing, because when we were feeding, we did nudge a lot of the material over that the worms were focused in, which was the fresh bedding, fresh food. And we did get a pretty decent look at them, so I figured maybe I would flash that once again, because later in this video, after we've had a really good look at them as they're getting released into their new environment, we're going to see what we could do about coming up with an estimate. How does that sound? I always like collecting these estimates of how many worms my systems have living in them. And it does seem to me like with the help of all the viewers, we do come up with some fairly plausible, realistic numbers. So now, can you guess which side is the finished castings and which side is the horizontal migration feeding zone? I think it's pretty obvious. So even last time when we went through these finished castings, we took a really good close look at whether or not there was still any worm activity in any of it, and it seemed like, especially out here on the far side opposite of the feedings, there was, no worms at all. So I would say this, this farthest 2/3 of this batch here can probably just come right out of here, and end up in storage as finished castings. Here and there I still bump into some of these black soldier fly larvae, which have not yet started to get active again and try to transform into an actual black soldier fly, I think they can remain in that state for a really long time until, you know, temperature, weather type conditions line up for being more hospitable to them. So I always take those as I encounter them, and I just bring them out into my outdoor compost barrel. So now we're kind of venturing closer to the partition wall, and even there I'm starting to think that we're going to see pretty much nothing, because even last time, the few that we did find over right alongside the partition divider, we picked them out and we threw them over into the nice damp area where all the fresh foods and fresh bedding have been getting applied. And it did seem very unlikely that worms would, you know, knowingly cross that cardboard divide and come back over into the finished castings, considering how nice the environment is that they live in over on the feeding side, the collection side. So here and there it's becoming more and more likely that we're going to bump into a worm as we come right up against the divider. Worms that probably used to live out in this general area and have since just moved in this direction because, you know, the cardboard is full of holes, so it doesn't prevent worm traffic from passing through, and it is cardboard after all, so all the moisture that gets thrown into this side in the form of foods and everything else does soak in and does permeate. Oops. I gave this little black soldier fly larvae quite a strong spin in my fingers. I thought I was breaking up like a chunk of stuck together castings or something. I didn't realize I had a larva in my fingers there. Sorry, buddy. So yeah, I don't mind having those little guys around, but I definitely wouldn't want to have them sort of springing to life and turning into flies down here in my basement of my house that I live in. So we found 2 worms and we found 2 black soldier fly larvae. Let's make that 3 worms, but that's not many worms at all. And I guess we could pick through this a little bit in more detail, but finding only 3 worms in all that time, I think, is pretty good evidence of the fact that we're more or less done depopulating that material of the inhabitants. And we definitely helped a lot in the beginning too, because we didn't just pour the contents of the bag over into here. We screened everything first. And all the stuff that did pass through the screen, that stuff all ended up over there, treated as the more or less the finished castings, but everything that the screen caught, including the worms, were thrown in on this side. So all these large chunks of stuff that we're pulling out here was all stuff that was just floating around within the material when it was still in the bag. And as you can see, there's a good bit of it. You can even hear it all clunking around as I drop it in here. It's certainly not finished castings, so it wasn't like that the bag had reached some sort of a point where there was nothing left for the worms to eat or nothing, no bedding for them to live in. The system would have just kept on going fine on its own if, you know, we had chosen to do it that way. But it did seem like, you know, the bag has sort of been used as an annual sort of project, and the time had already come for that project to start anew this year. So it was time to free up that container so that it can go back outside and get reset. And it already has been reset. It's been almost 2 weeks now since it was reset. And look at that, how much stuff we already pulled out of here, and I don't think we've even gotten anywhere near where the majority of the worms are. Even over here in the feeding area, we've just been finding almost barren sections. I've already extracted enough to fill up my plastic container. I'm almost thinking this is, you know, probably a couple hundred worms at least that we've pulled out so far, because we haven't been discerning about, you know, trying to exclude worms or anything. We're just pulling material out, trying to, I guess, strip away a lot of the stuff that was not the most fresh, juicy stuff all added. That stuff was all put up against the very, very far edge to try to get worms to really make their way over deep into the collection area and out of the finished castings. That's the only reason I'm trying to really create a clear line over here in terms of what's what. Try to keep it clean, I guess that's the main reason. Keep the nice castings clean. But you know, I'm thinking it's time to sort of create a little mental snapshot of how many worms are in this stuff right here, and sort of scribble that number off on the side and bring it back later, because I think we're going to need to free up some space in this container. I'm just going to go ahead and drop them into their new home, so it'll be sort of a little bit of a pre-release of the main population. The main population, I believe, is actually still down here within this pile as I'm gradually just skimming top layers of this stuff off. All that nice fresh bedding that we put in there for them, as well as the nice foods that they've gotten over the past couple weeks over there. I would have to say that that's probably where we're going to find the most worms. So let's get this box emptied out and the worms moved over. So now down here in the new bin, I built this thing, a few weeks ago, but it's one of those environments that it's bedding only. I didn't do one of those pre-feedings that I do sometimes. Sometimes I'll put some food in advance, maybe right when I've built the bin, but this time it was just piling in a bunch of bedding and dampening it, and then it was left that way pretty much since I built it. So I haven't interacted with this system whatsoever, so it'll be curious to see how things look in here. Everything's got a nice dampness level. Looks like that covering of bubble wrap did a good job allowing the system's moisture to sort of recirculate throughout the material in here. But I figure as long as I'm going to be coming in here anyway, and I got to make some space for this food, why not give the whole thing a quick stir before we start introducing the inhabitants. So I've kind of tilled up half of the system already. The system has a little bit of dry material on top, and that was, I guess, my other goal here too, was to see if I could blend that stuff in a little bit and get everything in here a little bit better equalized. I guess if we had a more thorough plastic covering, then we'd we'd see a little bit less moisture loss through evaporation, but I think there's always opportunities to replenish the moisture content. A lot of times just through putting food in. The food's moisture content itself will also always make its way into the system. It's got to go somewhere, right? So down here in the hole, the system's sort of getting its first feeding now, prior to even being populated with worms. You can see a lot of these cabbage leaves were already pretty far along in the decomposition process before they got frozen. So we've already piled in a few leaves, but weight-wise, it's not a whole lot quite yet. It's just a little snack, if you ask me. And this is all of it. I was just gonna make this their sort of initial feeding, so they got a little something to dive after once they get introduced. But I think they'll be ready for more food soon. These are all foods as well. All this material, all these leaves, obviously, but also the cardboard and paper shreds. So their bedding is also fair game as far as food goes. So I never feel like my worms are, lacking any food, as long as they've got at least some bedding to nibble on. So, all right, enough of this prep. Enough of this getting the bin ready for the inhabitants. Let's just drop these little guys in. I almost feel a little bit bad for these little guys going right in on top of this chilled material right below. Well, I don't think it's going to stay cool for long, I mean, it's all surrounded by room temperature material, and it's such lightweight material too that it just probably doesn't hold on to its moisture much. So let's get these little guys cut loose, and please do what I do, which is just sort of build a rough number in your head of how many we've moved over so far, and then we're going to have to add to it the remainder of the worms that we're bringing over. Look at all this stuff, though. We're definitely bringing over a lot of stuff from the worm bag. The worm bag had all kinds of stuff floating around within it. All this stuff up here on the very top surface. All fair game as far as food goes, as far as I'm concerned, at least. Even the stuff that's sort of stuff you would originally classify as bedding is all so heavily seasoned here that it's pretty much food too. So very, very nice. Yeah, I mean, it didn't seem to me like there were all that many worms, perhaps not even enough to try to run the footage back quickly, but yeah, you know what? Let's do a little bit of that, because at least we can see them better, their movement, right? Okay, I think it's time to go get the next round of worms. That's where they're really going to be. This was just a little sneak preview. Next batch will be where all the worms really are. Okay, back to the bin. The number 4 bin, the bin with the number 4 worm population in it, which is pretty much at this point losing all of its identity as a result of being removed from this box, because you know, for a long time it was outdoor, for a long time it was over winter, a long time it was in a bag. None of those things are true anymore. So now we're going to start getting a glimpse at how many worms we've succeeded in gathering here. We're going to haul out this entire collection area. So I'll do my best to show the process, but I also don't want to unnecessarily prolong the activity either. I'd really like to just get the worms out of this box and into our transport container, which is hopefully large enough to to hold all this stuff that we're going to be extracting from here. So far it's looking pretty good, like we're going to make it. I didn't think it was going to be quite that much. It was interesting that we actually did already remove enough to fill this thing entirely and moved it over with that first little batch of a few hundred worms. But here, as I mentioned earlier, we're now getting a chance to see how many worms actually lived in the worm bag, and it does seem like there's quite a number of them. In that big environment, in that large bag, it always did seem a little bit tricky to see them, because they'd always just be scattered everywhere throughout the entire environment. And since it was a pretty large environment, you never really got to see them all that, concentrated or like jumbled together. They were always sort of spread out and all over the place. So here now we're finally getting a chance to kind of get a close-up look at them all, one handful at a time. I'm already starting to get a rough number in my head. Hopefully you are too. So maybe you'll want to wait until we release them into their new environment, where you'll get yet another look, or maybe if you're already convinced that you know how many worms we're moving over, then please write your comment and give me your guess. All the realistic estimates are going to be averaged together, including my own estimate, just counting as yet another estimate, not getting any preferential weighting in the averaging or the calculations. Just a straight old averaged estimate of how many worms we just pulled out. So I think we've got them all. I guess if we encounter any more, perhaps one or two, we can pull them out as well. But I bet if we were to just explore this very edge of the material here a little bit, maybe we'll hit something that's got a little bit of leftover cardboard in it, and as a result maybe a few worms hanging out in it. We could pull them out. I could always set up some sort of a basic simple baiting mechanism to try to get the last of any worms that might still be in this stuff out, but it certainly doesn't seem like we're gonna find many. So I'll probably do that off camera or not. Doesn't even seem like it would be that important to do so, because it does seem to me like we did successfully now on this version 4 system's 376th day in service. I believe we've now pretty much depopulated it. And that brings an end to the current system. And don't worry, once we launch off these worms we're transporting, we're going to be applying an official label, making this an official indoor system. All right, let's go ahead and get the little wormies situated into their new home. Okay, here we go. Let's make it official. Time to release the worms into their new home. We've got a little bit of extra stuff that came along for the ride here. Stuff I guess we can maybe use as a feeding zone indicator, just to show where we placed all that yummy cabbage for them, right down the middle. We'll use this right here as our top covering sort of feeding zone indicator. Ooh, emergency vehicles. But we'll do that at the end. Now it is time to welcome the new wormies to their freshly prepared 2-3-week-old system now, 2-week-old system that we built for them. And now it's finally time to cut them loose on a nice fresh batch of bedding and a nice little snack to kick it all off. And I'm going to see what I could do about spreading this pile out a little bit so we can all get a better view of just how many worms we're bringing over. And don't forget, I'm looking forward to seeing everyone's estimates in the comments of how many worms it is that we just released into this box to start off this brand new system. Please let me know. That's it, and this is going to make it official. As most of you know, if you're regulars here on my channel, we always christen a brand new bin and make it official using a label. So sometimes I'll have to come back and correct the alignment because at the angle that I'm looking at down on this hat, it's hard to tell if I've got it level, but that makes it official. Please join me in welcoming our newest system of red wigglers, pretty much 100% detached from their identity of being an outdoor worm system. Worms originally recruited from the outdoor compost barrel and run in the grow bags outdoors for a long time. So in time they'll just fade in with the rest of my red wiggler community and be indistinguishable from the rest of them. So I've got a few more things I got to take care of putting away and cleaning up over here, but I'm not going to keep you around for that. That stuff's boring. Before I go really quick though, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And it's also really appreciated if you put a comment in. Don't forget, what's your estimate of how many worms we just launched this system with? I look forward to seeing your comments. Also, don't forget, if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel too. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.